Jiwoo pressed her face against the cold window of the research ship. Stars filled the dark space around them like tiny diamonds. She had dreamed of this moment her whole life. Finally, humans were going to meet other species in the galaxy. Finally, they would not be alone anymore. The ship New Seoul moved slowly toward the huge space station ahead. Epsilon Prime looked like a metal city floating in space. Hundreds of different ships surrounded it. Some were long and thin like needles, others were round like bubbles. A few looked like they were made of crystal that caught the light from nearby stars. "Stay close to the group," Dr. So-Young said as she walked past Jiwoo. "Remember, we are guests here. The Galactic Council agreed to meet with us, but many species still think humans are dangerous." Jiwoo nodded, but kept looking out the window. At 19, she was the youngest person on the team. She had studied alien life forms for years, but only from old pictures and videos that other species had shared. Now she would see them with her own eyes. Captain Minho spoke over the ship's speakers. "We dock in 10 minutes. Everyone prepare. For station gravity, it will feel different from Earth normal." The research team gathered their equipment. There were 20 humans total, all experts in different areas. Admiral Tae-min led the group. He was a serious man with gray hair who had spent his life preparing for this day. Dr. So-Young was the head scientist. She had taught Jiwoo everything about xenobiology. As they docked, Jiwoo felt her stomach flutter with excitement. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. The air that came in smelled different, cleaner somehow, with a hint of something she could not name. They walked into a large hall with a high ceiling. The first thing Jiwoo noticed was how many different beings filled the space. Some were tall and thin with blue skin. Others were short and covered in fur. A few floated in the air without touching the ground, but none of them looked friendly. As the human group moved through the station, other beings stepped away from them. Some pointed and whispered. Others made sounds that might have been warnings. Jiwoo heard the word primitive several times in different languages. "They are afraid of us," she whispered to Dr. So-Young. "Not afraid," the older woman replied. "They think we are too wild, too unpredictable. The council has told them stories about human wars and violence." Admiral Tae-min stopped the group near a large viewing area. Through the transparent wall, they could see the beautiful swirl of a nearby galaxy. "We wait here for our escort," he said. "Remember what we practiced. Show them we are peaceful." Jiwoo wandered a little away from the group. She wanted to look at the alien technology built into the walls. Everything was so smooth and clean. Earth technology looked rough and simple compared to this. That was when the lights went out. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting red shadows everywhere. An alarm began to sound, a low, terrible noise that made Jiwoo's bones vibrate. Beings throughout the station began to run and scream. "What is happening?" Admiral Tae-min shouted. The answer came in the form of crashes and explosions from somewhere deep in the station. Then Jiwoo heard a new sound, a clicking, scratching noise that made her skin crawl. "Vorthak," whispered a blue-skinned alien. As it ran past them, the word was filled with terror. Dr. So-Young grabbed Jiwoo's arm. "We need to get back to the ship, now." But it was too late. The corridor filled with smoke and the smell of burning metal. Through the gray cloud, shapes moved. Large, dark shapes with too many legs. The first Vorthak appeared like something from a nightmare. It stood 3 meters tall on 6 insect-like legs. Its body was covered in black armor that looked like it grew from its skin. 4 arms ended in claws that could slice through steel. But the worst part was its face. Almost human, but wrong. Its eyes glowed red in the emergency lights. The creature looked at the human group and let out a sound like breaking glass. More Vorthak appeared behind it. They moved like hunters who had found their prey. "Run!" Admiral Taemin ordered. The group scattered. Ji-woo ran down a side corridor, her heart beating so fast she thought it might burst. Behind her, she heard screams and the terrible sound of claws on metal. She ducked into a maintenance bay and hid behind some large pipes. The room was dark except for a few small lights. She could hear the Vorthak searching the corridors. Their clicking sounds got closer and closer. One of them entered the maintenance bay. Ji-woo held her breath and tried to make herself as small as possible. The Vorthak moved slowly through the room, checking every shadow. Its claws scraped against the walls as it searched. The creature was bigger up close. Its armor was scarred from many battles. Old blood stained its claws dark brown. This was Kithros, though Ji-woo did not know his name yet. He had killed thousands of beings for the Galactic Council. He was their perfect weapon, strong, fast, and completely without mercy. Kithros found her hiding place. He reached down with one massive claw and pulled her out from behind the pipes. Ji-woo looked up into his red eyes and saw her death there. But something stopped her from screaming. Something in those eyes looked sad, lost. Like there was a person trapped inside the monster. Instead of trying to run or fight, Ji-woo did something that surprised them both. She reached up and gently touched the tip of his blood-stained talon. With her small hand, the moment her skin made contact with his claw, the world exploded into light. Images flashed through both their minds. Ji-woo saw Kithros as he once was, not a killer, but a teacher. She saw him with young Vorthak, showing them how to build beautiful things with their claws. She saw him creating art from metal and stone. She saw him weeping when the Council's machines were put into his brain. Kithros saw through Ji-woo's memories what humans could be. Not the violent savages the Council described, but beings capable of love and kindness. He saw her studying other species not to conquer them, but to understand them. He saw her dream of friendship between the stars. The mental connection lasted only seconds, but it changed everything. Kithros stumbled backward, his claws shaking. For the first time in 300 years, he remembered who he really was. The neural implants that controlled his mind sparked and went dark. The programming that made him kill crumbled like old paper. He looked at Ji-woo with new eyes. Not red with artificial rage, but golden brown, the way they were meant to be. What have they done to me?" he whispered in a voice like falling. "Rocks. What have they made me do?" Ji-woo stood up slowly. She could see the pain in his face as 3 centuries of suppressed memories came flooding back. "They enslaved you," she said softly. "But you are free now." Outside the maintenance bay, alarms continued to wail. Other Vorthak were still hunting humans through the station. The Galactic Council would soon learn that their perfect weapon had been broken by a simple touch. Neither Ji-woo nor Kithros knew it yet, but in that moment they had started a revolution that would free the entire galaxy. The girl who touched the monster's talon had taken the first step toward changing everything. The news spread through the Galactic Council like fire through dry grass. A human had touched a Vorthak. The creature was no longer responding to commands. 300 years of perfect control had been broken in a single moment. High Counselor. Varric slammed his fist on the crystal table. The sound echoed through the council chamber like thunder. Around him, representatives from 40 different species spoke in worried voices. "This is exactly what we feared," Varric said. His species looked like tall, pale humans with silver eyes. The humans are a contamination. They spread chaos wherever they go. "One incident does not prove anything," said Counselor Thane. "Her people were covered in blue scales and breathed through gills on their necks. Perhaps the Vorthak unit was already damaged. You think this is coincidence?" Varric pulled up a hologram showing Epsilon Prime. Red dots marked where other Vorthak units had gone silent across the station. 5 more have stopped responding in the last hour. The contamination is spreading. On Epsilon Prime, Admiral Tae-min tried to gather his scattered team. Half the humans were missing. The station was in chaos as security forces searched for the compromised Vorthak. They found Dr. So Young hiding in a storage room with 3 other researchers. "Where is Ji-woo?" she asked as soon as she saw Tae-min. "We do not know. Captain Min-ho is still searching." The admiral looked older than his 50 years. Gray stubble covered his face and his uniform was torn. "The council wants us off the station immediately. They say we brought some kind of virus." Dr. So Young shook her head. "This is not about a virus. Something else is happening here." In the maintenance bay, Ji-woo sat on the floor across from Kithros. The huge Vorthak had not moved for an hour. He stared at his claws like he was seeing them for the first time. Sometimes he made soft sounds that might have been crying. "I remember now," he said in his deep voice. "Before the machines. Before the pain. I taught the young ones how to carve stories in stone. We were peaceful. We were happy." "What happened to your people?" Ji-woo asked. Kithros looked at her with his golden brown eyes. "The council came when I was young. They said the galaxy was dangerous. They said we needed to be strong to protect others. They put machines in our heads to make us better warriors." His voice became bitter. "The machines took away everything that made us who we were. All of you. Every Vorthak in the galaxy. Thousands of us. We became their perfect weapons, strong, enough to crush any rebellion, but too controlled to think for ourselves." He held up one massive claw. "These hands once created beautiful things. Now they are only good for killing." Ji-woo reached out again and touched his claw gently. "You remember who you were. That means you can be that person again." This time the connection was softer. Instead of the explosion of memories, Ji-woo felt a warm presence in her mind. She could sense Kithros's thoughts, his pain, his hope, his growing understanding of what had been stolen from him. But she felt something else, too. Other minds, distant but growing stronger. Across the station, across the galaxy, Vorthak were starting to remember. The touch between human and Vorthak had created some kind of chain reaction. "They are waking up," Kithros said in wonder. "I can feel them. My people are remembering who they were." The door to the maintenance bay suddenly burst open. Captain Min-ho stood there with a plasma rifle in his hands. Behind him were 2 station security guards. "Step away from the creature," Min-ho ordered. He was a young man, only 25, but he had trained his whole life for situations like this. "Wait," Ji-woo said, standing up slowly. "He is not dangerous anymore. That thing is a Vorthak. They are born killers. No, they are not." Jiwoo moved to stand between Minho and Kithros. They were made into killers. There is a difference. One of the security guards spoke into his radio. We found the human girl. The Vorthak unit is with her but shows no hostile behavior. Impossible, came the reply. Vorthak always show hostile behavior. Kithros slowly stood up to his full height. The security guards raised their weapons, but he made no threatening moves. Instead, he looked at Jiwoo and spoke in his careful, slow way. Little human, you have given me back my soul, but the council will not let this spread. They will try to kill us both to hide what you have done. Then we need to run, Jiwoo said. Where can we go? The council controls everything. Captain Minho lowered his weapon slightly. He had been watching the exchange with growing amazement. There might be a place, he said. The abandoned world of Chiron. It is in neutral space. No one goes there anymore. Why not? Jiwoo asked. Kithros made a sound that might have been a laugh. Because it is the old Vorthak homeworld. The council told everyone it was cursed after Way. They enslaved us. The lights in the maintenance bay flickered and went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, but in that brief darkness, they heard new sounds from the corridors outside. Running feet, shouting voices, the high whine of charging energy weapons. The council forces, Kithros said. They come to clean up the contamination. Minho spoke into his communication device. Admiral Taemin, we need immediate extraction. Location Maintenance Bay 77. Negative, Captain. Council forces have the docking bay surrounded. We cannot reach you. Through the walls, they could hear the sound of energy weapons firing. Someone screamed. The security guards looked at each other nervously. There is another way, Kithros said. The old service tunnels. They lead to the outer ring where the cargo ships dock. You would help us escape? Minho asked. Why? Because the girl has shown me what I lost. Because my people are starting to remember. Because the council fears humans for a good reason. You can set us free. They moved through the dark tunnels like ghosts. Kithros led the way, his natural night vision helping them avoid patrols. Jiwoo stayed close behind him, still amazed by how gentle he was despite his fearsome appearance. As they walked, Kithros told them about the old days, about Vorthak art and music and philosophy, about how his people had been the galaxy's peacekeepers, using their strength to protect the weak and build beautiful cities among the stars. We were never monsters, he said. We were guardians. The council corrupted that nature and turned us into their private army. They reached the cargo bay as alarms began sounding throughout the station. Through the wide windows, they could see council warships surrounding Epsilon Prime. The beautiful alien station was becoming a prison. A small cargo ship sat alone in the bay. It was old and worn, but the engines were running. Whose ship is this? Minho asked. Mine, Kithros said. I came here in it. The council allows us to have personal transports for our missions. They climbed aboard quickly. The ship was built for Vorthak, so the ceiling was high and the seats were massive. Jiwoo felt like a child in the pilot's chair. As Kithros started the launch sequence, Jiwoo felt something strange in her mind. Other presences growing stronger. She could sense Vorthak across the galaxy, all of them starting to wake up from their long mental sleep. They know, she said suddenly, the Vorthak everywhere. They know what happened here. Kithros nodded as the ship lifted off. The connection between our minds runs deep. When one of us remembers, we all begin to remember. Outside the cargo bay, Council fighters moved to intercept them. Energy beams lit up the space around the small ship. "Hang on," Kithros said, and pushed the engines to full power. As they jumped to hyperspace, leaving Epsilon Prime behind, Ji-Woo realized that her simple touch had started something much bigger than she had imagined. Across the galaxy, the Council's perfect weapons were beginning to remember who they really were. The revolution had begun. The old Vorthak homeworld looked dead from space. Chiron was a brown and gray planet with no lights visible on its surface. The oceans had dried up long ago, leaving only empty basins filled with salt. What had once been great cities were now ruins covered by sand and time. "It was beautiful once," Kithros said as their ship entered the atmosphere. His voice was sad as he looked down at his people's lost world. Green forests covered the mountains. The cities were made of white stone that caught the sunlight like gems. Ji-Woo pressed her face to the window. Even in ruins, she could see the remains of something magnificent. Broken bridges stretched across empty valleys. The shapes of huge buildings rose from the desert like the bones of sleeping giants. "What happened here?" she asked. "The Council took our young people first," Kithros explained as he guided the ship toward a flat area near some ruins. "They said it was for education, for opportunities among the stars. By the time we realized what they were really doing, half our population was gone." The ship landed with a soft thud. When they opened the airlock, hot, dry air rushed in. It smelled of dust and old stone. In the distance, they could see the broken towers of what had once been a great city. Captain Min-Ho checked his scanner. "The air is safe to breathe. No life signs anywhere." "There would not be," Kithros said. The Council made sure of that when they left. They walked toward the ruins. Ji-Woo had to work hard to keep up with Kithros's long legs. The ground was covered with small stones that crunched under their feet. Sometimes she saw pieces of metal or glass among the rocks, parts of things that had been broken long ago. As they got closer to the city, Ji-Woo began to see what the Vorthak had been like before the Council changed them. The buildings were not just functional, they were works of art. Even broken and worn by time, she could see the beauty in their curved walls and graceful arches. "We built with our claws," Kithros said, noticing her wonder. Each building was carved by hand from single pieces of stone. No two were exactly alike. They entered what had once been the city center. A large plaza was surrounded by the remains of tall spires. In the middle stood a broken fountain, its carved figures still visible despite centuries of neglect. "This was the Harmony Square," Kithros said. "Young Vorthak came here to learn about art and philosophy. We believed that true strength came from understanding, not violence." Ji-Woo walked to the fountain and ran her hand over one of the carved figures. It showed a Vorthak, holding something small and delicate in its claws. The care in the carving was obvious, even after all this time. "Why did the Council want to change you?" she asked. "Because we asked questions they did not want answered," Kithros replied. "We believed that different species should work together as equals. The Council preferred slaves and masters." Captain Min-Ho was scanning the area with his equipment. "I am picking up some kind of energy source deeper in the city. It is very faint, but still active." Kithros's eyes widened. "The memory core. I thought it would have been destroyed." "What is the memory core?" Ji-Woo asked. "Our most sacred place, where we kept the history and wisdom of our people. If it still functions..." Kithros started walking quickly toward the city center, his excitement growing. They followed winding streets between ruined buildings. Sometimes Jiwoo saw glimpses of what life had been like here. A broken playground where young Vorthak had played. The remains of workshops where artists had created beautiful things. Gardens where families had gathered to share meals and stories. The memory core was built into a natural cave in the hillside. The entrance was carved to look like the open petals of a flower. Ancient symbols covered the walls, worn but still readable. "The writing tells our history," Kithros explained as they walked into the cave. "From our earliest days to the coming of the council." Inside, the cave opened into a vast chamber. The walls were covered with more carvings, and what looked like metal panels that still glowed faintly. In the center of the room stood a device unlike anything Jiwoo had ever seen. It was tall as a tree, but delicate as a spider's web. Thin metal strands connected hundreds of small crystal nodes. Each crystal pulsed with soft light, creating patterns that reminded Jiwoo of a heartbeat. "The amplification array," Kithros whispered. "Legend said it could connect the minds of all Vorthak across the galaxy. I thought it was just a story." Jiwoo approached the device carefully. As she got closer, she felt a familiar tingling in her mind, the same feeling she had experienced when she first touched Kithros's Talon. "I can feel something," she said. Other minds, distant but real. Captain Minho was studying his scanner with growing excitement. "The energy patterns are incredible. This device is not just active, it is connected to something. A network that spans light years." "The neural web," Kithros said with wonder. "Our ancestors built it to keep all Vorthak connected, no matter how far apart we traveled. The council must have thought it was destroyed when they took our world." Jiwoo reached out toward the device, then stopped. "What would happen if I touched it?" "I do not know," Kithros admitted. "But if it works the way the old stories say, it might be able to reach every Vorthak in the galaxy at once." "That could be dangerous," Minho warned. "We do not know what kind of feedback might occur." But even as he spoke, they could hear sounds from outside the cave. Ships landing, voices shouting orders. "The council had found them. They tracked us," Kithros said. "I should have known they would monitor all Vorthak ships." Through the cave entrance, they could see lights in the sky. Council dropships were landing all around the ruins. Hundreds of troops poured out, their weapons ready. "Surrender the contaminated." "Human!" a voice called out across the plaza. It was amplified so loud it echoed off the ancient walls. "Return to your programming, Vorthak unit. You will be repaired and return to service." Kithros made a sound like grinding stone. "They still think I am their property." More ships arrived. Jiwoo saw something that made her heart sink. Other Vorthak were climbing out of the transports. But these ones still had the red glow in their eyes. They still carried the council's mental chains. "My people," Kithros said sadly. "They brought my enslaved brothers to hunt us." The controlled Vorthak spread out around the memory core. There were dozens of them, all moving with the mechanical precision of the council's programming. "We are trapped," Minho said. "There is no other way out of this cave." Jiwoo looked at the amplification array. The crystals pulsed faster now, as if responding to the danger. In her mind, she could feel the distant presence of Vorthak across the galaxy. So many of them, all locked in mental prisons. "Maybe there is a way," she said. "Jiwoo, no!" Minho grabbed her arm. "We do not know what that device will do to you." "But we know what the council will do if we do nothing," she replied. "They will keep using the Vorthak as weapons. They will never let them be free." Kithros knelt down beside her. Little human, this is not your burden to carry. My people's freedom should not cost your life. What is freedom worth? Ji-woo asked. For you? For all the Vorthak who do not even remember who they used to be? Outside, the council troops were setting up equipment, energy weapons, neural dampeners. Everything they needed to recapture or kill the escaped prisoners? 1 minute, the amplified voice called. Surrender or we will take you by force. Ji-woo looked at Kithros, then at Captain Minho. I need you both to promise me something. If this works, if the Vorthak are freed, help them build something better. Do not let them become conquerors. Help them remember how to be guardians again. Before either could respond, she stepped forward and placed both hands on the amplification. Array. The world exploded into light and sound and impossible sensations. Ji-woo felt her consciousness expand beyond her body, beyond the cave, beyond the planet itself. She touched the minds of thousands of Vorthaks scattered across hundreds of worlds. Each mind was a prison cell. Each one contained a person who had forgotten how to be free. One by one, Ji-woo began to unlock the doors. Across the galaxy, Vorthak warriors stopped in the middle of their missions and remembered who they were. On the mining world of Kepler-7, a Vorthak unit named Thyros was executing prisoners for the crime of asking for better working conditions. As his claw descended toward a terrified miner's neck, images flashed through his mind. He saw himself as a young Vorthak learning to carve delicate patterns in stone. He saw his teacher's gentle guidance. He saw the joy on a child's face when given a small toy he had made. Thyros pulled back his claw and looked at his hands as if seeing them for the first time in centuries. The neural implant behind his left eye sparked and went dark. Run, he told the prisoners. Run, and tell others that the Vorthak remember. On the Council Fortress world of Nexus Prime, Admiral Taemin and the remaining human diplomatic team were being held in detention cells. They had been there for 3 days since the incident at Epsilon Prime. The guards were a mix of council species. Some looked like tall gray beings with large black eyes. Others were covered in scales or fur. The contamination spreads, one guard said to another. Reports are coming in from 12 systems. Vorthak units going offline without explanation. It is just equipment failure, the other replied, but his voice was not confident. Dr. So Young pressed her ear to the cell door, trying to hear more. At 55 years old, she had spent her whole career studying alien life. She understood better than most what Ji-woo's touch might have triggered. They are scared, she whispered to Admiral Taemin. Whatever Ji-woo did, it is working on a scale they never expected. Meanwhile, on Earth, Commander Yu-jin was coordinating humanity's response to the crisis. She stood in the command center of the lunar base, watching reports flood in from across human space. Every colony, every outpost, every ship was on high alert. Council forces are mobilizing everywhere, reported Lieutenant Jun Seo from his station. They are pulling back their Vorthak units and replacing them with other species. Other species? Yu-jin asked. Something called the Nexari. We have never seen them before. On her main screen, Yu-jin pulled up the first images of these new council enforcers. They looked humanoid, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, with pale skin that seemed to glow faintly. Their eyes were completely white, with no visible pupils. Psychic. Dampeners, she realized. They are bringing in telepaths to counter whatever is freeing the Vorthak. Engineer Da-eun looked up from her workstation. She was young, barely 22, but she understood technology better than most people twice her age. I have been analyzing the reports from ships near areas where Vorthak have gone offline. There are consistent energy patterns, some kind of neural frequency that seems to originate from... She paused, checking her calculations again. From where? Yujin asked. The old Vorthak homeworld. Chiron. Back on Chiron, Jiwoo was lost in the vast network of Vorthak minds. Each consciousness she touched was different. Warriors who dreamed of being artists, killers who remembered being teachers, destroyers who longed to build beautiful things again. But the process was killing her. The human mind was not designed to handle this kind of connection. Energy coursed through her body like fire. Her heart raced so fast it felt like it might burst. "Ji-woo!" Captain Minho shouted, but his voice seemed to come from very far away. Through the cave entrance, the controlled Vorthak were advancing. Their red eyes glowed in the darkness as they moved with mechanical precision. Behind them came the Nexari, tall, pale figures who moved like ghosts. Kithros stood between the approaching enemies and Jiwoo. His golden-brown eyes were filled with desperate determination. "I will not let them take her," he growled. The first Vorthak to enter the cave was someone Kithros recognized. Gorvak had been his student once, long ago. Now neural implants covered half his head, and his eyes burned with artificial rage. "Brother," Kithros said sadly, "do you remember the day you carved your first statue? You were so proud when the elders praised your work." Gorvak hesitated for just a moment. Something flickered in his red eyes. That moment was enough. Through the amplification array, Jiwoo's influence reached him. The neural implants sparked and died. Gorvak's eyes shifted from red to their natural golden color. "Kithros," he said, in confusion. Where are we? What happened to our world?" "The same thing that happened to our minds," Kithros replied. "But we can be free again." One by one, the controlled Vorthak entering the cave began to remember. Each liberation sent new energy through the array, expanding Jiwoo's reach even further. But the Nexari were another matter. They moved through the freed Vorthak like they were not there, their white eyes focused only on Jiwoo. As they got closer, she felt a terrible pressure in her mind. They were trying to cut her connection to the array. "Psychic attack," she gasped. Blood ran from her nose as the Nexari pressed their mental assault. The leader of the Nexari spoke, without moving his mouth. His voice appeared directly in their minds, cold and empty. "The contamination ends here. Surrender the human. Return to your programming." "Never," Kithros roared. He charged at the Nexari leader, his claws extended. The pale being raised one hand, and Kithros stopped in midair, held by invisible force. "You were made to serve," the Nexari said. "You will serve again." But then, something unexpected happened. One of the Nexari soldiers stumbled. She pulled off her helmet, revealing a face that was almost human except for the white eyes. "I remember," she whispered. I was a teacher, on a world called Lithia. They took me when I was young. They said I had a gift." The Nexari leader spun around in shock. "Impossible! Your conditioning is absolute." "So was theirs," the female Nexari said, pointing at the freed Vorthak. "But the human's touch breaks all chains." Jiwoo felt the woman's. Mind touch hers through the array. The Nexari had been the Council's first experiment in mental slavery, children taken from their families and trained to suppress the thoughts of others. but they were still people underneath the programming. The psychic battle that followed shook the ancient cave. Freed Nexari fought against controlled ones while Vorthak warriors protected Jiwu from the remaining council forces. Energy beams and psychic attacks lit up the darkness. Through it all, Jiwu held on to the array. Her connection now reached across half the galaxy. Thousands of enslaved minds were awakening. On mining worlds and factory planets, on council ships and fortress stations, beings who had forgotten how to think for themselves were remembering freedom. But the effort was destroying her. Her body was breaking down under the strain of channeling so much psychic energy. "I cannot hold it much longer," she whispered to Kithros. "Then let go," he said gently. "You have done enough." "No." Jiwu's voice was weak, but determined. "There are so many more. Millions of beings still enslaved. I can feel them out there. If I stop now, the Council will find new ways to control them." She pressed her hands harder against the array, pushing her consciousness even further, past the Vorthak, past the Nexari, to other enslaved species she had never known existed. The gentle klaxon builders who had been forced to make weapons of war, the artistic melody weavers who were made to compose songs of despair instead of joy. One by one she touched their minds and set them free. But with each liberation, her own life force grew weaker. The cave around her began to fade as her vision dimmed. "Hold on, little human," Kithros begged. "Just a little longer." Outside, council reinforcements were arriving, but they found their own troops in chaos as more and more beings broke free from mental control. The revolution that had started with one girl's gentle touch was spreading faster than they could contain. The galaxy was waking up. The final battle for freedom was fought not with weapons, but with memories. Jiwu's consciousness spread like light through the darkness of the galaxy. Every enslaved mind she touched became another beacon, reaching out to free others. The Council's empire of control was crumbling as billions of beings remembered who they truly were. On the Council's capital world, High Counselor Varek watched his perfect order collapse. Reports flooded in from every corner of the galaxy. Vorthak units refusing. Orders. Nexari psychics breaking their own conditioning. Even the supposedly loyal species that formed the Council's core were beginning to question their masters. "Sir," his aide reported with barely controlled panic, "we have lost contact with 17 fortress worlds. The klaxon builders have stopped working on the new battle stations. The melody weavers are singing songs of rebellion instead of the approved hymns." Varek's silver eyes burned with rage. "Deploy the final protocol. If we cannot control them, we will destroy them all." But his order came too late. In the command center, technicians who had been loyal for decades suddenly stopped what they were doing. One by one, they turned to look at Varek with new understanding in their eyes. "You enslaved us too," one of them said in wonder. "Not with machines, but with fear and lies. We forgot that we had choices." The technician reached out and shut down the weapon systems before Varek could stop him. Meanwhile, on Earth, engineer Da-Un had been working desperately to understand the energy patterns coming from Chiron. What she discovered changed everything. "Commander Yujin," she called excitedly. "I know why humans can break the Council's control systems. It is not magic or special powers. It is empathy." "Explain," Yujin ordered. "The Council's neural implants work by suppressing emotional connections. They turn beings into isolated individuals who cannot feel compassion for others. But human touch carries something the machines cannot block. genuine care for another person's well-being. Da-Yun pulled up a complex diagram showing brain patterns. When Ji-Woo touched that Vorthak, she was not trying to control him or use him. She just wanted to understand his pain. That kind of pure empathy creates a resonance that breaks through any artificial barrier. So any human could do what Ji-Woo did? In theory, yes. But it requires tremendous mental strength to maintain that level of connection. Da-Eun's expression grew worried, and the energy readings from Kiran suggest that Ji-Woo is dying from the effort. Back in the ancient cave, Ji-Woo was barely conscious. Her body was failing as she channeled more psychic energy than any single mind should be able to handle. But she could feel how close she was to reaching every enslaved being in the galaxy. "Just a little more," she whispered through lips that were blue with exhaustion. Kithros knelt beside her, his massive form gentle as he held her small hand. "Let me help," he said. "Let me share the burden." "It will kill you too," she protested weakly. "Then we die as free beings," he replied. "Better that than living as slaves." Around them, the battle had ended. The freed Vorthak and Nexari had overcome the remaining council forces. Captain Minho was tending to the wounded while newly awakened beings tried to understand what had happened to them. But the real fight was taking place in the realm of the mind, where Ji-Woo struggled to reach the last enslaved populations. She could feel them out there. Whole species that had been subjugated for so long they had forgotten freedom was even possible. "I am not strong enough," she admitted. "Then do not do it alone," said a familiar voice. Ji-Woo opened her eyes to see Dr. So-Young entering the cave. Behind her came Admiral Tae-min and the rest of the human diplomatic team. They had escaped from the council prison when their guards abandoned their posts to join the revolution. "How did you find us?" Ji-Woo asked. "We followed the psychic trail," Dr. So-Young explained. "Every freed mind creates a pathway that leads back to you. The whole galaxy is connected now." Admiral Tae-min looked at the amplification array with awe. "Is it true? Can any human use this device?" "The connection is already open," Kithros explained. "Ji-Woo has created a network that spans the galaxy. Others can add their strength to hers." Dr. So-Young did not hesitate. She placed her hands on the array beside Ji-Woo's. Immediately, she felt the vast web of consciousness that her student had created. The pain was overwhelming, but so was the sense of purpose. One by one, the other humans joined them. Admiral Tae-min, Captain Minho, even the linguists and historians, who had come only to study alien cultures. Each person who touched the array added their empathy and determination to the growing network. The effect was immediate. With multiple human minds working together, the psychic wave that had been slowly spreading across the galaxy became a flood of liberation. On distant worlds, beings who had been slaves for thousands of years suddenly remembered what it felt like to make their own choices. The Council's empire did not fall with violence and war. It simply stopped. When beings are no longer willing to obey, orders become meaningless. High Counselor Varric found himself alone in his command center as his staff walked away to start new lives. He tried to activate emergency protocols, but the computers no longer responded to his voice. Even the machines had been liberated by beings who finally understood they had the power to choose. As the last enslaved minds across the galaxy awakened, Ji-Woo felt a deep peace settle over her. The pain was fading now, replaced by something warm and bright. She could sense millions of beings taking their first free breaths in centuries. "It is done," she whispered. The amplification array pulsed one final time, then went dark. But the network it had created remained, a permanent connection between all free minds that would prevent anyone from ever enslaving the galaxy again. Ji-Woo collapsed into Kithros's arms. Her breathing was shallow and her heartbeat weak. The effort of freeing an entire galaxy had burned out her life force like a candle in a hurricane. "Will she live?" Kithros asked Dr. So Young. The older woman checked Ji-Woo's pulse with tears in her eyes. "I do not know. She has given everything she had." But even as Ji-Woo's body failed, her mind remained connected to the network she had created. She could feel the joy of Vorthak artists creating beautiful sculptures again. She could hear melody weavers singing songs of hope. She could sense klaxon builders constructing homes and schools instead of weapons. "It was worth it," she said so quietly that only Kithros could hear her. In her final moments, Ji-Woo felt something unexpected. Instead of darkness, she sensed a new kind of light, the combined consciousness of billions of free beings sending their love and gratitude back to her through the network. She was not dying alone. She was surrounded by the minds she had liberated, all of them sharing her burden in those last seconds. When her heart finally stopped, the psychic network carried her essence forward. In a very real way, Ji-Woo became part of every free mind in the galaxy, a guardian presence that would always remind them of the price of liberty. Kithros held her body and wept, but his tears were not only of sorrow. They were also of joy. Around him, his people were remembering how to laugh and sing and create. Children who had been born into slavery were playing games their ancestors had invented. Artists were teaching others the skills that had been forbidden for centuries. Years later, a great memorial was built on Earth. Representatives from 847 different species came to honor the human girl who had touched a monster's talon and changed the galaxy forever. The memorial was not a statue or a building, but a garden where beings from every world could come together to remember that freedom is always possible. Kithros spent his remaining years teaching others about the old ways, not just Vorthak traditions, but the universal principles of peace and cooperation that had existed before the Council's rule. He became an ambassador between species, helping to build the new galactic community that arose from the ashes of the old empire. Admiral Taman established the Free Galaxy Accord, a system of governance based on consent rather than control. Every species had the right to develop according to their own values, but all were connected by the psychic network that reminded them of their shared responsibility to protect each other's freedom. Dr. So Young founded the Ji-Woo Institute for Empathic Studies, where beings from across the galaxy came to learn how emotional connection could solve problems that force never could. And in the quiet moments between the stars, when the galaxy was at peace, some said they could still feel Ji-Woo's presence in the network, watching over them, reminding them that the greatest strength was not the power to destroy, but the courage to understand. The girl who had touched the monster's talon had indeed changed the galaxy. She had shown every being in it that freedom was not something to be given or taken away by others. It was something that lived in every heart, waiting to be awakened by a simple act of compassion. In the end, that was humanity's greatest gift to the stars. Not advanced technology or superior weapons, but the understanding that every being, no matter how different or frightening they might seem, carried within them the capacity for goodness, and that was enough to set a galaxy free.